Hey, I'm Glenn Kendall with Concourse Hosting, and today we're going to be talking about dashboard eye candy. So GoToWebinar has this big fat control panel that it has created on your desktop. What I'd like you to do is to go down, find the section in the webinar there, or in the control panel rather, that is called questions, and then click that little box with the arrow on it, and then pop that out, and then collapse the rest of the control panel down by hitting the red arrow at the top. This will allow you to ask questions as we go, and please, of course, I encourage you to ask questions, and then by collapsing the control panel down, you can see what's going on. So today I'm going to be using Tableau Desktop and Tableau Server. The latest version is 10.4, so I just upgraded to these, and still learning some of the cool new stuff in there. But yeah, that's the latest version, 10.4, and also be primarily using a data source based on Razor's Edge query that is attached, that we've created with Tableau Server. It's basically the sample data that comes with Razor's Edge that we've turned into this data source. So before we go any further here, I just want a quick show of hands, if you will, if you don't mind, to see and letting me know how much experience you have with Tableau, whether you're brand new, you're just learning, 6 months, a year, you're a pro, you've been doing this for years, whatever. So go ahead and type it into the questions window there so I get a sense of what your experience level is. So yeah, I mean, in a sense, we're all students here, and so I don't have any, expertise or certification that makes me, so much more better and knowledgeable. I'm learning just like everyone else, and encourage you again to ask questions as we go, and so share those questions with everyone, and yeah, we'll just kind of learn stuff as we go here. So it looks like most of the crowd, and we do have quite a crowd today. This is one of the biggest webinar attendance, a large number of attendees that I've had. So a lot of people chiming in here. Looks like most people are new. A handful have a medium level of experience. So yeah, thank you for that. So again, here's a question for you, and maybe this is a question of why this particular webinar attracted you. Like, what is eye candy? Like, what do you think of when you think of eye candy, and what is it that made you want to come to this webinar specifically about? What is it about eye candy that you're like, yeah, I want to go to that? So when you think eye candy, is it something that your brain enjoys? Is it something the eye enjoys, if you can call it that, or both? Let's see. One person said something that's engaging, it's a pleasure to look at, something that your eye enjoys, because our frontline developers want it. That's always a good reason. Yep, gotta keep those frontline developers happy. Aesthetically pleasing, something that triggers questions. That's a good point there. At a quick glance, it looks great and draws in users. Yeah, so these are all great points, and I want to explore this concept a little bit more. First of all, I want to preface this by saying that I'm not a designer. I don't have a background in design. I'm a tech geek, information security geek, IT geek, that kind of thing. So when it comes to design, having people work on our website or stuff like that, like other people do that. I don't do that. I'm not a designer. So, but I think the point is that we're going to talk about some things about what it is about data visualization, if you will, that creates that eye candy, that visual interest for people. I really love Trisha's point here at the end. She said, eye candy is something that gets a point across to people who think visually without boring them. All right. So take a look at this, and I'd like you to go through here and count the number of 9s that you see. How many 9s you see in this grid? This probably looks very similar to your annual report, right? Or maybe some crystal report that you're giving your, your executives now. There's a bunch of numbers in there. There may be something important. So yeah, it's kind of hard to find the number of 9s in there because there's a lot of data. So I'll help you out a little bit here and see who can get the answer first. So some people said 4, some people said 5. So you've noticed now I've added a little bit of highlight there to the 9s to make them stand out a little bit. And for those of you that need a little bit more help, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And still more help, I'm going to do that. Well, now it's easy, right? You can just take a quick glance at it. You don't even have to count. Otherwise, you sort of have to, just the way our brains work, you have to serially scan either by rows or columns. And maybe some of us are better than that than others, but it's work. Whereas if there is some kind of visual indicator there, you can quickly look at it and see, okay, there's 5. Now I'm going to move the 9s around, and I'm also going to add another element. So now I'd like you to do the same exercise and then also count the number of 9s. So you can see here I added another element. I'll also put the 8s in there. There's a lot of 8s. I've colored those. That's eye candy, right? Color is eye candy. So it's more work. You can probably count them out and see, but those 8s kind of get in the way. All right, so hold that thought, and we're going to look at another picture here. So this one is just shapes. And now we're going to add something. So now you can see if I go back and forth. Well, clearly that's not too hard. We can clearly see that we've added a different arrow going in a different direction. What about this now? Again, your eye can quickly jump over and see, okay, there is an arrow that's slightly oriented differently than all the others. All the others are the same, but that one that's slightly different, we can see that, right? Especially if I go back and forth like this. And now I can see it even easier because it's been highlighted. So both there's a color and the orientation cue, the visual cue compared to everything else. What about this? Added more color. So what is the pattern here? What would you say is the pattern here? Is there a pattern here? I think this kind of thing is the sort of thing that when we start using Tableau, we may end up doing to our users, is that we're trying to convey something, but when you look at it, you're like, it doesn't pop out immediately like the other ones did. So there's no clear pattern about what this is. What do those colors mean in relation to each other? And there's no grouping. There's no way I can just look at this and say, yeah, I know what those colors refer to, or the directions, or whatever. Shape is another visual indicator, right? Like Sesame Street. Which one doesn't look like the other? Quickly, we can see which one doesn't look like the other. Our brains process that very quickly. And okay, if you have more than one shape, oh, yeah, we can still see that. There's two in there. It's maybe a little bit slower, but it's still pretty quick to process. But the danger then is that if you start adding too many things, then it starts to lose any pattern, any meaning, and what stands out in this case, right? There's no one particular thing that stands out because there's a lot of different stuff going on. If you add color to it, in this way at least, it doesn't help because there's too many different colors to be able to distinguish what's happening. However, in this case, by adding color just to the smiley faces, I can say my brain immediately goes to those and I say, aha, you know, that's what it is that I should be focusing on. So this may seem like, you know, either kind of obvious or silly, but this is actually very powerful, and this is really at the core of why data visualization works. And so when we talk about eye candy, there's really a technical term for this that's called pre-attentive processing. And so we're going to go to a website here and that's going to explain, you know, and give a little bit more examples about it. I think this is important to understand that there's basically a low-level part of your brain that can pick out those things immediately, and it does it in like a quarter of a second or less. Before you even know you're focused, what you're focusing on consciously, at a subconscious level, your brain can pick those things out and do it pre-attentively. So this is a really cool thing, and this is really the key behind what makes data visualization work. And so when I'm saying eye candy, and what we're going to talk about today, is how do we leverage these particular things that take advantage of the pre-attentive processing that immediately draws someone's interest at a subconscious level and focus on those things and know that, you know, sort of the best way to bring those kinds of things out. So just indulge me here for a second. I know this is a little bit geeky, but we're going to go to this website here, and I just want to point this out because this particular gentleman, Christopher Healy, is really, you know, one of the foremost researchers in this topic of data visualization. This particular graph he has is about, I think, the last election, but this is what he's, you know, what I just demonstrated here is what he's talking about, where you can see the red dot that immediately comes out. You know, if you have a bunch of squares and you have a circle in there, you can immediately pick that out. And then if you start to combine things together, then it gets harder to pick things out. So he comes up with these different kinds of pre-attentive attributes that you can look for, that immediately the eye is drawn to. So there's length, so this line is longer than all the others. There's sort of this closure orientation, so, you know, here's a circle, here's a bunch of half circles. Size, this one's thicker. Color, density, curvature, you know, all these different things. So these are things that they've studied and figured out, here are the pre-attentive things. Okay. So if you're interested in this, you know, spend some more time on that website and check that out. Really the core ones that I want to focus on are these. Position, where it is, where it shows up, the length, the size, the shape, color intensity, and color hue. There's different types of data that you're going to work with. And so in Tableau, these are organized in categories, which are called dimensions, and quantitative values, which are called measures. There's also ordinal values as well that, you know, things may be in a certain order. But basically, based on the type of data that you're working with, these are the kinds of things that you should use. So you can see position is always like the preferred thing to use. For categorical, shape and color are next. For quantitative, it's length and size and then color. And not color hue, you know, color intensity first, and then color hue, up to 2 color hues. And it kind of goes like this from more to less. And, you know, this is a lot of information. I don't expect you to remember this here. So just, you know, write this down or keep this as a reference, that this is kind of a good starting point when you're thinking about adding that pre-attentive visual element. Start with one of these in this order and sort of add on that way. There's some additional pre-attentive visual attributes that he has listed there. Things like the orientation, the curvature, adding little marks, grouping things together, enclosing things. These are what I consider to be like more advanced. And depending on what you're doing, yeah, go ahead and throw these in if you're able to do it. But the other ones are the primary ones, these ones up here, to focus on. And so really all of those are represented in this graph here. So these are the primary ones when you're using Tableau, you know, that you're going to be looking at. Any questions about any of that, pre-attentive attributes and how that relates to the types of data? I realize that's a little bit, you know, kind of technical, but I think that's important to understand, kind of the reason why your brain likes, that's the eye candy part, why it likes those things. All right. No questions. Hopefully I didn't put everyone to sleep here. So we're going to jump into Tableau here in just a second, but quickly, just some other conventions to think about when you're building things. Important data usually is on the top. That's where your eye is just naturally drawn to the top to look for what's important. So if you want to point, you know, something to be emphasized, put that on the top. We're used to looking at time flowing from left to right. So if you don't do that, if you do time going a different way, then you might have to explain that or have some kind of, you know, just additional text or indicator of that that's what's happening, because that's just the way our brain thinks. Location data, we're used to seeing that on a map. It makes more sense to us when it's on a map. And then horizontal bar charts versus vertical bar charts, and horizontal versus vertical. I mean, in general, we're used to reading text horizontally. Sometimes when you do bar charts, they'll go vertically, and then they'll have the sort of explanation or header along with it that's also vertical. That's harder to read for people. And this is a great new book that I just got, that just came out, called The Big Book of Dashboards. I took some references of what I'm going to be working on today from here with you guys. So this is something that I recommend you take a look at. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and hop into Tableau here and take a look at some of these things. So this is Tableau Desktop. Tableau Desktop is the builder program. This is what you do to, you know, create your workbooks and dashboards, and then from there you can publish it to Tableau Server. The other thing you can do is connect to data. So I'm connected to our Tableau Server site. I'm already signed in and connected to, again, the sample data. So I'm going to connect to this GIFs data source. And I'm going to follow my own advice and collapse my control panel down and move my questions out of the way so I can see what I'm doing here. So just one thing you may want to do when you're looking at GIFs is you may want to look at how many GIFs did we get across different GIF types? So I'm going to do this just as an example of looking at data in a categorical way. So going back to that slide that I was showing, we're going to be looking at categorical in there. So if I double click on one of the dimensions, it automatically adds it to the viz, and I'm also going to double click on GIF subtype. It put GIF subtype on the columns. I actually want to keep it on the rows. So we're going GIF subtype next to GIF type. And let's look at maybe the, let's change this to a measure, the GIF's internal ID. So this is basically the GIF ID, and we're going to count the number of unique GIF IDs that we have to find out how many GIFs that we have. Where'd you go? Okay. I don't want to sum the IDs. I want to count the distinct IDs. Let's filter out the nulls so I don't see those. So I'm going to drag. I'm going to, when you click on a pill, or sorry, if you hold down the control button and then drag it over, it makes a copy of it. So I took GIF subtype and I drug it over here to filters, and then I'm doing a filter on the GIF subtypes, and I'm filtering out null because I don't want to see the nulls, just for purposes of this. Okay, so I have some numbers here. How do we start to add some data visualization to it? Well, let's represent that instead as a bar chart. When you hit the drop down here in Tableau, this show me drop down here in the upper right, again, you're going to want to move your GoToWebinar control panel so you can see this. There's all kinds of different ways that you can represent this data. So automatically it thinks a bar chart is the best way to do it, so you can go ahead and select bar chart. So we've done that. Maybe we also want to display the number of GIFs actually on the viz itself. So to do that, again, I drag the pill down here while holding the control button down, and that makes a copy of it. So now I've added that label here. But it's still pretty boring. So what are some recommendations you guys would have based on those pre-attentive attributes for what we could add a color element to add some more visual interest to this? I'll give you a hint. It's one of these items up here. GIF type, GIF subtype, or maybe a count of the number of GIFs. So we're already organizing things here by GIF type. So we have some couple different ideas here. Some say color by GIF type, and some say color by the gift, the number of GIFs, the count of the GIFs. So let's try both of those to see what happens. If we color by the GIF type, again, I'm holding down the control button as I do that, so it makes a copy of it. If I don't do that, it just drags it down. So if I do it based on the GIF type, what it does is then it emphasizes the fact that I have these organized by GIF type. That's my primary organization by GIF type. And adding the color element, to me, emphasizes that. So that, I think, makes more sense for this particular viz to add it based on that category. But let's try the other one just to see how that works. So this particular one is adding it based on the number of GIFs. If we add it based on the number of GIFs, it's adding that additional emphasis to, okay, you know, we got more GIFs, so it's a darker color. But it's kind of, it's harder to know than like what we should make of the rest of these down here. So I don't think that in this case that adding the number of GIFs to the color is really helpful. I think in this case the GIF type is more helpful because we're already seeing through the length the number of GIFs, and adding it to the color as well doesn't emphasize it anymore, and I think it makes it more confusing when you're trying to look at these other values. That's just me personally. Let's look at, someone said GIF subtype. Let's take a look at GIF subtype. If you do GIF subtype, I think this is really confusing because it's organized first by GIF type. However, if you said, aha, I'm going to move these around and I'll do GIF subtype as the primary and GIF type as the secondary, now I think this makes more sense. Your eyes are immediately drawn to those different areas, and you know, this would make sense. So I think it's because of what you're primarily organizing it on. That's what you'd want to emphasize there. Someone else said the colors of the bars could indicate the subtype so that they could be compared across GIF type. So we could do that as a suggestion. Somebody said to try that. So I think to do that, what we do maybe is do GIF subtype and just drag it down here instead. So that's, I think maybe that's what you're suggesting. So that way the GIF subtypes are actually colored. Yeah, maybe. This is still, for me, this is hard to tell kind of what's going on and what those mean, because it's just kind of jumbled up, and maybe we have too many subtypes that way because they're also not organized by kind of grouped together. Let's see, somebody else says, what about dropping the GIF type from the row pill and just encoding type by color? Okay, let's remove this. So we're just doing this. Yeah, you could do this, but I think, personally, I think this is more confusing, right? I think having this extra level there makes it clearer and cleaner than doing this. But depends on your use. Okay, so quickly on here, just a couple of other things that you can do to sort of spice things up is that when you go over on the tooltip, just you'll notice by default it puts into the tooltip whatever elements you have in the viz itself. It just automatically drops them in there. So one thing that I like to do in here is to get rid of some of these explanations because they're kind of self-explanatory, and make the GIF subtype, that's the primary one, make it bigger, a different color, it's already bold, maybe make these a little bit bigger. So it might not be clear in this case that we're talking that, you know, the relation between the GIF type and the GIF subtypes. Maybe if you did something like this, put them there together. And when you mouse over it, then you can see, okay, pledge event, there's 5 of those. And then, of course, you could add more text and additional explanation. But it's just a little nicer and more inviting when you can do that in the tooltip and invite the users to And sometimes, you know, you can put some additional information in here too. You know, if you wanted to have the subtype not be there, you just have that in the detail instead. Then when they moused over it, they could see, you know, which one it is. Kind of forces them to mouse over it to see what those are. Other quick things that you can do here is you can add a border. If you add a border around the bars, that helps them pop out a little bit more. Then also on the label, you can play with the label, maybe make it a little bit bigger. Change the alignment. You can either force it to the inside or to the left. And, well, that didn't turn out well. Yeah, I think we would have to move, this is where if you start playing with the font size, to make this a little bit bigger so that when you change the font size here, it's not going to get buried in the number itself. And then also maybe play with, you know, with this, the white space, showing these as different shapes. But bar visually is something that we can quickly, pre-attentively be able to compare these to each other and just intuitively see those differences. So bar is probably the preferred way to go there. Jason made a really good point about avoiding the red-green colors because of the red-green color blindness and a tendency for people to think that green is good and red is bad. Yeah, you can't. People do think that automatically. So yeah, that's a really good point. And what you can do is go up here to edit colors, and there's some color palettes that you can choose. You can either change the whole palette or just change these individual ones to say, you know, instead of green, I'll make it brown. But yeah, there's some better palettes up here that you could use that you know, take those kinds of things into account. So this is where you can bring out your inner designer. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's I was going to actually mention that in the next one I'm going to build here. So. Cool. Let's build another one. For this one, we are going to do, let's do gift amount this time. And gift date. And we have another calculated field we've created here called giving level, which is it's basically like a giving pyramid. And we've just done it by default in increments of 10. So if somebody's given up to $10, that's one giving level, 10 to 100, that's another giving level, and so on, just, you know, sort of times 10 in different giving levels up to 1 million. Again, sample data here. Let's filter this a little bit. So we're only looking at a range of dates. Let's do, when does the data really start? Say 1/1/2008, and 12. $2016, 31. Tableau's too smart, it keeps correcting my my things because it knows I have to put in the month first beforehand. All right. So these are my different giving levels now. I might want to filter this a little bit more so I don't have to scroll up and down, but let's do 2012 instead. Okay. So here's the different giving levels. So what would be really interesting to look at here? Maybe we can look at the comparison from one year to another. There's a built-in way to do that in Tableau called a table calculation. So you can do a quick table calculation and say % difference. You can then edit the table calculation to make sure it's doing what you want it to. I really want to do like across years. And we'll filter out this one. So we have to look at that one because it's the first year in there, so when we're doing a comparison, it doesn't show up. So now we're looking at a percentage difference. So 2013 compared to the year before, how did we do at the different giving levels? So it's going up over here, down over here, up over here. What should we add color-wise to this to emphasize that? Which of these elements, year, giving level, sum of gift amount, should we add to the color to emphasize these differences that are happening? Well, let's just throw some things on here. Okay, if we add giving level, does that help things? It is one of our categories. So giving level doesn't really help things. It just kind of makes a bigger mess of things. So following what we did before, what if I did year? Okay, so if I do year, this follows what I was saying last time, which basically years are the equivalent of categories in this case, and now I can see, you know, the breakdown year to year of what's happening. It's a little easier to see that, but I can't really tell, you know, it's hard to tell what these mean because they're plus and minus. So Daniela's on the right track there. She said we should do the sum of the gift amount instead. So again, control, drag down onto color, and what should we pick for the color? So if we pick red, green, Jason is cringing now because we picked red, green. We have more green than we have red. So yeah, for those of you that have to leave now, just know this webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to catch the rest of it later on YouTube. What we can do is add a stepped color and then change the number of steps so that kind of that last level then comes out. But the problem with red-green is that for those that are red-green colorblind, they're not going to be able to see the difference here. So, but we're on the right track. We want to have a different color and make it easy to distinguish. This is negative, this is positive. So instead of red-green, there's different things you can do. I think orange-blue is one that's preferred over that. So kind of conveys the same thing to do orange-blue instead. In addition to that, you can also, drag the percentage down onto the label, same as what we did before. I just want to make this a little bit bigger. Come on. All right. One more try here. So hard to get it just to move a little bit. All right, there we go. I can also add a border, same as what we did before, again, to make it pop out. Someone asked a question, what does it mean by the 4 nulls in the bottom? There's some nulls in the data. Tableau doesn't know what to do with it. So it's asking you, what do you want to do? So in this case, it just means there's some funky data, bad data in there. We'll just go ahead and filter it out, and so it doesn't show up anymore. But yeah, that's just Tableau's way of letting you know that something doesn't fit. Someone asked a question, what about encoding the bars so that the width represents the number of donations? The width of the bar. I think I understand what you're saying. So we could go to the GIF's internal ID, maybe put that on size. And then instead of sum, we'd be doing count the distinct. Yeah, so you could do that as well. I think it depends on what it is that you're trying to convey. I think that might be a little bit too cute to do that, but if you're very clear that that's what it is, or if you have, I think in this particular case, because we have very big differences in the number of GIFs at the different giving levels, you know, that kind of stands out. Yeah, I mean, it's something to play with. There's no like right and wrong answer to this. It's always a trade-off, right? It's like what are we going to get from it versus, you know, is it going to make things more confusing? So that's a great idea. And yeah, you just kind of play with it and see, test it on your users, you know, see if that's something that makes sense. And then, yeah, again, here we can change the tooltip to make it not as terrible and boring. Okay. Any questions about any of this one? I want to do one more. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to connect to a different data source. I'll just open another Tableau, not Notepad. Where, oh, where did it go? What ours? Let's see here. So with this one, I have a couple of different bits of data that I'm putting together. So before I do this, actually there is one more thing I want to do first, and that is to do latitude and longitude, so to do a map. So there's a built-in latitude and longitude. And then we'll do gift amount and show gift amount on the map by color. We'll do this as a filled map, but before I can do that, I have to add some detail about which elements I want to include. So I have the constituent attribute, or rather the constituent address that I drug over here to the detail for state. Sorry, I said that all wrong. Constituent address, the state, I drug that over to detail. Okay, so then that tells Tableau, look for state. And so basically it's saying, okay, here's all of the people, you know, we're color encoding this to say, here's the people who, or rather the states that gave the most gifts. That's a darker color, and the lighter or omitted colors, there wasn't any giving. We can also add country on here as a detail, so we don't forget our friends in Canada. So then the Canadian provinces show up as quote-unquote states for this purpose. But kind of the problem with this is that when anytime you're working with a map and you don't actually need the map part of it, you just kind of want to know where the donations are coming from and visually be able to tell that. Sometimes, you know, because you want to zoom in so you can get some level of detail on it, but then it's like, well, you know, we're missing out on Hawaii, and then it can be really hard to tell what's going on over here in New England sometimes, you know, that kind of thing. So one way around this is to create a tile map instead, so that basically it's treating each state as its own, you know, as a block that's just kind of arranged on the map, similar to how things are laid out on a real map. So to show you how I did this, basically, I create an Excel spreadsheet that has all the states listed in it. Sorry, I didn't include Canada in this one. The abbreviation of the state, and kind of on a grid pattern, the space and the rows in which they occur. All right, so let me show you how this works and make a little bit more sense. When I added this in here, Tableau, because it sees numbers for row and space, it made them as measures, but I'm going to convert those to dimensions. Yeah, so back on my data source here, the sheet is the one I just showed you. The donations, these are just some sample pretend donations that I'm just joining together with this sheet. Then the state abbreviation, I can actually pull over here on the text. So then you can kind of quickly see, okay, this is the layout of the United States. I've got, you know, this is the arrangement of the states. And so now when I encode this one with the gift amount, drag that over onto color. Well, now it's just coloring the words instead, so we'll see what to do to fix that. But I can see, you know, sort of everything together in one place without having to zoom around. So just some other things I have to do to make this work is that I have to drag the abbreviation. I actually have to change the color of my grid to white. Leave the abbreviation there. I'm going to first change the color of the grid to white. And then I'm going to add a border around it. So now they all appear as little boxes. So I just have to adjust this to make them kind of bump up together. And then you can just play with this to get the exact layout and whatnot that you want. When I superimpose that on top of it, though, this I need to play around with the filter here a little bit. Sorry, the formatting here a little bit to change the format of that. So I'm retaining that grid that I started out with there. Okay, so I don't want to do any row banding. So get rid of the row banding. Also the row banding for the header. Get rid of that part. Let's see here. I'm trying to remember how I play with the size on this to make this work. There's one more thing that I wanted to do, which is to, some of the states don't have GIFs in them, so I want to be able to show that. So I have to create a calculated field for the gift amount. I just call it GA plus a 0. Okay, so here I have my states. I don't remember how to do the formatting for the to get the abbreviation for the state to appear on top of that. So I apologize for that. We're running out of time here, but yeah, if you play around with this, you can get a visual representation of what it looks like. All states are represented equally then, and then people can mouse over, get some additional details on those particular states that they're interested in. So I just want to show that as an alternative to doing a regular map, so you don't have to zoom and move around as much. So when you incorporate something like this into a dashboard, that is just kind of a static thing that people don't have to feel like they have to move around on or zoom into certain areas to get more information on. This is what the final product looks like. This is actually one that I had played with. previously. So yeah, you can format it to do something like this, so that in the end you get, you know, a nice little grid that has all the states on it, and then you can again change the tooltips so that they will be a little more interesting to mouse over and stuff. So we're running here against the top of the hour, so I want to be mindful of the time. I always try to cram as much into this as I can, and so I apologize that the last one maybe wasn't 100% clear, but yeah, if you have questions about how to do a tile map, reach out to me and we can work on it together. I can send you this Excel spreadsheet that I have with the tiles in it that can kind of get you started on there at least. And I'm going to stick around for a little while and take some questions, but thank you all for coming today. Hopefully this was helpful, and just think about those pre-attentive attributes and reference those particular things when you're creating your eye candy for your dashboards. All right, thanks so much.